All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We usually think of the ground beneath our feet as, well, solid, permanent. But right now, we are actually witnessing a massive, real-time geological disruption. What we're about to look at isn't just your run-of-the-mill natural disaster. It's a literal symptom of our planet breaking apart before our very eyes. 12,000. That is exactly how many years the Hayli Gubbi volcano down in Ethiopia sat completely dormant. I mean, for over 12 millennia, not a single recorded eruption. Then, absolutely out of nowhere, on November 23rd, boom, it exploded. And it didn't just quietly wake up either. It went off like a literal bomb. The blast was so incredibly powerful that people heard it up to 190 kilometers away. Even the neighboring country of Djibouti felt the shockwaves from the earthquake it triggered. Which brings us to part one of our explainer, the eruption heard worldwide. And the chain reaction from this was just wild. Think about it. You've got this violently sudden explosion in Ethiopia, launching an ash cloud 50,000 feet into the atmosphere, so massive you could literally track it from space. And the consequence? That cloud drifted right over Oman and Yemen, eventually hitting Pakistan and India, completely paralyzing modern air travel. We're talking mass flight cancellations all the way from Delhi across the Middle East, with the ash even creeping toward China and Myanmar. Now, you might be thinking, hey, why does a little bit of ash ground the entire commercial airline industry? Well, this isn't just campfire smoke. That cloud is packed full of highly abrasive rocks, tiny crystals, and glass particles. If a jet flies through that, those materials get sucked right into the turbines and can completely shut an engine down mid-flight. Plus, all that airborne glass and crystal essentially acts like razor blades or extremely coarse sandpaper. It can scratch up the cockpit windows so severely that the pilots are left flying completely blind. So yeah, flying through it is a massive no-go. Let's move on to part two, Earth's most alien landscape. Because this massive explosion didn't just happen randomly. It originated in a place known as the Danakil Depression. This is an incredibly remote region in Ethiopia that actually sits entirely below sea level. And honestly, it looks completely alien. Thanks to some super intense chemical reactions happening right at the surface, the ground is painted in these surreal neon yellowish, greenish, and bluish colors. It's totally mesmerizing, which makes it a huge draw for tourists and geologists. But make no mistake, it is an incredibly brutal place to be. Temperatures here regularly push past 50 to 55 degrees Celsius. That's over 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Throw in the fact that it gets almost zero rain, and it's officially known as the hottest place on Earth. Luckily, because it's such a hostile environment, nobody was actually living near the volcano when it blew, so thankfully no human lives were lost. But its extreme nature makes it an absolute goldmine for geologists, for a very specific reason. Which brings us to the ultimate mystery we're unpacking today. What kind of immense underlying force could be strong enough to violently wake up a mountain that's been fast asleep for 12,000 years? That leads us to section 3, a continent tearing apart. Get ready for this staggering geological revelation, because this recent eruption, it was not just a random fluke. It's actually a massive warning sign that the African continent is actively, literally, splitting right in half. We are watching a single massive continent begin to divide into two entirely separate landmasses. This totally connects back to things you probably learned in middle school. Remember the ancient supercontinent Pangaea, how it gradually broke apart into the puzzle pieces of the continents we know today? Well, history is repeating itself. The Earth's crust is made up of these massive shifting plates, and deep underneath Africa, those exact same forces that tore Pangaea apart are hard at work all over again. Right there in the Afar region of Ethiopia, exactly where our volcano sits, there's an intersection of three distinct tectonic plates. You've got the Nubian plate, the Somali plate, and the Arabian plate. But instead of bumping into each other, they are currently pulling away from one another. And this three-way separation is literally unzipping the Earth's crust. Let's look closer at this in section 4, the Great African Rift. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to grasp the sheer scale we're dealing with here. We aren't talking about some pothole or a local crack in the dirt. Geologists are tracking a massive 6,000-kilometer-long fissure. This megatrench stretches all the way down from the Red Sea, cutting straight through Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, and all the way into Mozambique. That long line is the exact seam where Africa is going to eventually tear into. And here's something wild. This massive East African rift system is actually responsible for sculpting some of Africa's most iconic landscapes. All that tension and pulling created towering volcanoes and mountains, like Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya, and Ethiopia's famous bubbling Erda Ale lava lake. And as the ground pulled apart and sank down, those massive voids eventually filled with water, creating the spectacular deep Great Lakes of Africa, like Lake Malawi, Tanganyika, Albert, and Kivu. So the breathtaking beauty of Africa is quite literally born from its own destruction. You know, it's so easy to brush off geology as ancient, slow-moving history, but back in 2005, the Earth unzipped a 60-kilometer trench in the Ethiopian region in just 10 days. 10 days. It was a sudden, violent crack that proved this transformation is actively happening right now, before our very eyes. And that brings us to our final section, the birth of an ocean. Looking at the geological timeline here, we really start to get the big picture. While the Hayli Gubbi volcano just slept for 12,000 years, the plates underneath it never stopped moving. Scientists actually project that in about 5 to 10 million years from now, that rift will become so deep and so incredibly wide that a brand new ocean will rush in. It'll permanently divide the African continent and radically redraw the map of the Earth as we know it.
It's such a mind-bending contrast when you really think about it. Planet-altering geographical changes, like the literal birth of a new ocean and the splitting of an entire continent, are happening at the exact same imperceptible speed as human biology. The ground beneath Africa is drifting apart at just 2 to 5 centimeters a year. That is literally the exact same speed at which your fingernails grow. How crazy is that?
And that, right there, is the ultimate paradox of the planet we live on. We're riding on this incredibly slow, deep time process. But because the Earth's crust is rigid, all that slow-building tension constantly bubbles up to the surface as sudden, explosive natural disasters. It's the painfully slow drift of centimeters that eventually snaps, triggering terrifying events like that massive Hayli Gubbi ash cloud or the sudden July 2025 eruption of the nearby Erta Ale volcano. As we wrap up this explainer, looking at these extraordinary events leaves us with a pretty humbling realization. The map of our world, it isn't finished drawing itself. It's a living, breathing puzzle that is actively shifting underneath us. It really makes you wonder, as we go about our daily lives, what other massive, world-altering changes is the Earth quietly preparing right beneath our feet today?